Welcome to The Staff Room, an education podcast that takes a look into the world of pedagogy. In this series, we meet educators far and wide to chat about teaching and learning and share outstanding practice. My name is Michael Royale, and I'm sitting here with Tessa Johnson, and we're coming to you from Corpus Christi College in Perth, Australia.
This special episode, we'll be chatting to UK-based educator and author, Teacher Toolkit Ross McGill, who will be chatting to us about his hugely popular book, Mark, Plan, Teach. Stay with us to hear his philosophy on saving time, reducing workload, and making an impact on learning.
My passion is common sense, reducing teacher workload, because you look at the marketisation of education, global education reform, teachers are just being squeezed. Good teaching's good teaching. Mark, Plan, Teach brings it back to its basics.
I'm Michael Royale.
And I'm Tessa Johnson.
And this is The Staff Room.
Okay, so we are in episode 3 now of our podcast, starting off with Ross McGill, who, Michael, I'm presuming you're particularly excited for, because I've seen his book lying on your desk today. So can you tell us about what we should expect there?
Yeah, I'd love to. His book's just organised really well. It's basically in different sections, so Mark, Plan and Teach, and those are divided into 10 tried and tested practical techniques that us as teachers can use. And myself, as a new teacher, I just think it's really beneficial because these simple techniques are designed to save time and reduce workload.
Yeah, I know Ross is quite anti sort of gimmicks, isn't he? So I know he's got a section in there about the feedback stamp and sort of that sort of, worthless in the classroom, and it's we as teachers shouldn't just buy into gimmicks and do things for the sake of it, which, is quite interesting and quite a different perspective. And I think he's got more sense of, the gritty reality of the classroom than a lot of other theorists may have.
Yeah, exactly. And I've actually tried one or two of his techniques, which have worked really well, in particular the yellow box and live marking.
Oh yeah, I've done live marking as well. That works really, really well. Great way to formatively assess.
Yeah, definitely.
So, shall we get started?
I think we shall.
All right, let's go.
Ross McGill, or Teacher Toolkit, is the most followed educator on Twitter. With nearly 200,000 followers, Ross is widely known as a passionate educator, author, and award-winning blogger who shares inspirational ideas and outstanding practice worldwide. Ross's most recent book, Mark, Plan, Teach, has received rave reviews online and offers punchy practical advice and common-sense approaches for teachers to make an impact on learning.
So, welcome, Ross, and thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today.
Hello, it's good morning here. I think it's good evening for you, isn't it? But thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is just about. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I have been teaching 25 years. I trained to be a teacher when I was 19 years old down in South East London. 17 years of those 25 were in school leadership. The last 3 as a vice principal or a deputy head teacher. I'm not sure of the terminology you have in Australia. So almost kind of in charge of an entire secondary school. So, schools generally with 1,500 students, about 200 staff. So big, complicated places to work, very exciting. About 10 years ago, I started blogging. I lost my job, so I took voluntary redundancy. My son was born premature. So I was out of school for about probably just 6 weeks, but I kind of expected to be out for about 3 months or something like that. But I got bored, but I started blogging, got back into teaching, and I carried on blogging. I started blogging about my son because he was born premature. And then when he was home and safe, I started blogging about teaching because I kind of found a love of writing and got back into school and kept up with the blog and the demands of being a school leader. And 10 years later, the blog's read all around the world and the Teacher Toolkit Twitter channel's gone a bit out of control. It's become an accidental business where I'm now doing it full time. So I've been training all around the UK. Been to Canada, Spain. I'm off to Germany a couple of times, Switzerland in the next few months. So it's really exciting, and I'm just sharing my passion for common sense, good classroom ideas against the bureaucracy of the kind of status quo of the machine. So that's me in a quick snapshot.
That's fantastic.
If ever you're keen to come over to Australia as well and add that to your list.
I'd love Yeah, I've got a best friend in Brisbane. I've been over to visit about 7 or 8 years ago, so I'd love to come back over. Yes, if there's anyone listening and looking for someone to come over and share some good ideas or kind of inspire or provoke, I'd love to come over. Yeah.
I'm sure there will be.
We're really big fans of your book, Mark, Plan, Teach. Can you tell our listeners about it and who it's aimed for?
My passion is common sense, reducing teacher workload, because you look at the marketization of education, global education reform. Teachers are just being squeezed. Paperwork trails. We are teaching kids for a year and then having to evidence all the work we've done for the past year. Good teaching's good teaching, and Mark, Plan, Teach brings it back to its basics. Mark is essentially assessment, questioning, but I didn't think Assess, Plan, Teach was quite a catchy book title. So I went with Mark, Plan, Teach. And I went with Mark in that particular order because as training teachers, we plan a lesson first and we might go off and teach the kids and see what happens and might have some marking, but actually we should use assessment to inform our lesson planning. And then it's a cycle. So that was the principle. But in the book, there is probably about 30, well, there's 30 different chapters, and they are training sessions in themselves. And they evolved from 3 years of research with my 100 teachers in my own school about a Mark, Plan, Teach ideology, trying to have a one-page kind of guidance or a set of expectations. And I guess with my Twitter audience, as each time our staff consulted, I shared and blogged and tweeted my views. So as some things kind of crashed and burned or other things were retweeted around the world, I really got a sense of what was working. And each time that was shared, I was exposed to more research, more ideas, and just always reading and writing about it as we were going through it, and then living it in the classroom with my colleagues. It just became a bit of a handbook, I suppose, not just in terms of here's a very simple idea, but here's some research. And then working with Tim O'Brien, who's an ex-teacher and a psychologist, Tim gave his psychological insights as to why this idea would work. Not better than others, but why this idea would work. So, I put throughout the book its context, it's London teachers, London kids, secondary school. Not every idea will work everywhere, but, using my 25 years of experience, thousands of colleagues I've worked with, I think it's all amalgamated together, but also with the nature, I guess, evolving the book through social media discussion. It's probably, on reflection, never thought about it, but it's probably evolved through a lot of social media connection as well. So live research, even to the point when I was putting together the last parts of the book, I was still tweeting out some views and having just had a school inspection that was quite a brutal process, and kind of made my decision to kind of step out and do something different. If you read the opening dedication or the very last chapter, A Call to Arms, I was a bit more honest than I would normally be, knowing that these words would be written in the book forever. So yeah, it was a cathartic process, but very much steeped in research and a touch of psychology here or there. So does that answer?
Oh, most definitely. Yes, thank you.
Good.
I wanted to just ask you, you mentioned in your one of the messages is quality, not quantity. Would you say that working smarter and not harder is your sort of philosophy?
Absolutely. I mean, if I go back 10 years when I first put out the 5-minute lesson plan, I'm confident that you guys over in Australia have used it and seen it. I was shared that template by a couple of educationalists who I've known for a long time, and it sat on my desk for years, and I tried it with my own newly qualified teachers. And it was a paper version. I created a template out of it. And at the time in England, 2011, we were grading teachers in individual lessons and things like that. So I scribbled it down in 5 minutes, true to its name, and tweeted a picture just before I was being inspected in a lesson. And I guess being brave about those, that circumstance, that particular tweet went viral to a degree. So I thought, well, let me think about it a bit more. Obviously, it resonates with a lot of teachers, but over the last 10 years, it's evolved into lots of incarnations, even to the point where, now I'm speaking at lots of conferences. I want to create a 5-minute keynote plan, because not that it takes 5 minutes, but it's a crib sheet of thinking. And what I advocate with the 5-minute lesson plan is that it's not a form filling exercise. It's a thought process. And in the cold light of day, teachers are stretched. They have no time. And I think of everything that I've done throughout my entire career, even to when I was a student, I got very bored and frustrated by sitting in a meeting for an hour when something can be done in 10 minutes. And I think there's a danger that you might lose the details, but particularly in teaching, there's so much to do and so little time that it's really important that we strip back lots of nonsense. We kind of get to the core components, and then we give people choices. We like to give kids choices in classroom. We should do it as teachers. We don't always have to consume teachers' time with meetings and data analysis. So I think common sense and stripping things back to its bare bones is pretty much in my DNA, and I think that probably echoes through the book and through my resources that I've shared online. I'm probably making the complicated a bit more simple to understand, whether it's on a one-page sheet or a teaching idea or whatever it would be. But does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. And on that note, actually, both Michael and I, we totally understand. It really resonates with us that we are so stretched for time, and that time is so precious to the teacher. What do you think the effects of excessive teacher workload is on the staff well-being, having been in leadership yourself?
Well, the impact is, UK, I'm sure you've got the same things in Australia, and I can kind of, I've got a bit more time to read and research a lot more since I've stepped out. But, we can't recruit enough teachers. There's more teachers leaving the profession. There's more younger teachers because I guess people, there's a lot of teachers coming in later in the career. People have a career change after 20 years or whatever it would be. So we're struggling to recruit teachers my age or a bit older. And the government are missing their target, spending billions of pounds to recruit teachers. I'm not sure what it's like in Australia. I'm assuming it's the same challenge. It ultimately boils down to, if we want a society in Australia or England where we can walk down the streets, kids are safe, love thy neighbour, all those, that it's got to start at education, because if it doesn't start at home, and it's also a disadvantage because one child has parents, the other child doesn't, then school makes a bit of a difference. What we want to teach at school and how schools might look like in the future, I think needs to be up for debate, because as we get more immersed in research and psychology and what works and mental health and well-being, we're starting to discover that maybe schools, you know it, sitting in exams and desks and whatever else, might not be the best way for our kids. And ultimately we want to have a society where everyone puts learning at the heart of what they want to do. But how we define jobs and whatever else is up for debate. So I think we still very much work in an old education model, about 150 years old, that kind of kick-started over in the States, and it's evolved all around the world. I've been at a few schools recently where they're flipping that totally. Kunskapsskolan, I think it's pronounced, from Sweden. But, that's the kids' side, but then there's the teacher side. And ultimately the message is, if our governments don't fund schools enough, then head teachers cannot be creative to give teachers that little bit more time to do things during the school day. Yes, our core business is to teach and to mark and to plan, but I can't mark a set of 30 books in the school environment when kids are running up and down the corridor. I need somewhere kind of safe and calm, where I can concentrate and do the assessment properly. And that can be achieved in the school, but only if, a Wednesday afternoon, every school had a national CPD Wednesday where kids went home early and every teacher could either mark or conduct their own action research together or with colleagues in another school. And for me, those answers are really simple, and it won't cost a lot. And I know in places like America, Australia, New Zealand, you have sabbaticals and things like that. And it's quite alien for us over here. And we floated the idea here for 30, 40 years. And only now the government last month announced £5 million for teachers after their 7th or 10th year. Now, we've got 500,000 teachers in the UK, so when you get to a certain salary after 7 years, when you divide that £5 million by those number of people, it equates to about 130 teachers. So it's not very many people that are entitled to have a 12-week sabbatical or a year sabbatical. Because if you take the teacher out of school, the funding also needs to replace someone to come and replace that teacher who's out doing whatever. So the key message is funding. We get more teachers, more time. We can educate our kids. We can have more time to do the right thing and get more immersed in research and do things properly for our kids. And at the same time, the government need to rethink what's best for our kids and our society.
So do you think this is quite a new priority? You said it's been spoken about for a long time, but you think now the wheels are sort of turning, getting the wheels in motion?
No, I think people have thought about these for a long time. I think for me, my new research, I'm going to start my doctorate at Cambridge in October. I think social media has really changed the way we operate, we work, and how we learn. And there are dangers and downsides to that, as we know. We can easily get immersed in echo chambers, and we follow people that echo our own views. But that aside, we can suddenly, we can connect with one another halfway around the world all of a sudden from tweets, and now we're doing a podcast. So how we are working is very different. And my son, who's 6, he's coding, he's playing Minecraft, he's connecting with 1 or 2 of his mates. He could be a vlogger. YouTube might not exist in 20 years, but he might be doing the hologram version of YouTube. We don't know, and I think it's quite exciting times. But we have to have more time to understand that. The pitfalls, the benefits, and I guess with social media, we can widen our lens and be exposed to a lot more research than we've ever had before. If I think back 25 years when I first started, you just did what your line manager told you to do, and you were lucky if you went on a course once or twice a year. You got a folder, and that was pretty much it. The internet still took, if you clicked one page on the internet, it took 20 seconds for it to load up. So we're in a different world now, and I think it's quite exciting for everyone, particularly teachers.
Yeah, I think as well, like you were saying with blog posts, that's so accessible now through social media, and you're way more inclined to look at 10 tips to better staff well-being or whatever it is, rather than to go seek out a book, pick it up, start at chapter 1. It's so quick and so much more accessible.
I think my blogging journeys, I've taken a bit more seriously over the years. I've started to look at analytics, what works, my most popular blogs without a doubt are marketing tips or well-being strategies. And then you look at how many we get flooded with information 24/7 online. You need to capture people's attention. So as over years, writing huge essays in a blog post or spending 6 months to a year writing a book, you realize that people need 1 or 2 minutes max, very simple takeaway strategies, and then they've got a reference or something they can download. So I've discovered that through writing my blog for 10 years that even just having the reading time at the top of each blog post really helps someone when they first connect. Right, this will take me 1 minute to read or 3 minutes, and they can gauge whatever they're doing in the day, whether it's in the busy classroom or walking to catch a bus to go home from work. Suddenly you can get your tips really quickly on a blog post, and I think it's there's a lot more teachers in England now blogging. Everyone can do it, and it's great.
You seem to be a massive advocate for verbal feedback. Can you explain why?
Yes. You tell me if it's different over in Australia. I teach my kids. I talk to my kids every day. I tell them what to do, X, Y, Z. But Mr. McGill, the deputy head teacher, says in the policy, you need to evidence that when you talk to your children, they act on your feedback. So how are we going to do that? Well, when you talk to Ross, you can say, right, fill in this paragraph, explain what a volcano means, label the diagram. So Ross then writes down what Mr. McGill has said. I then stamp his book with a verbal feedback stamp, and then we create a written dialogue. I said this, you said this, I said this, I then did this, and we create a dialogue on top of the work that's been completed to prove to simply someone that pops in for 5 minutes in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time that the student has acted on the things that I've said in the classroom. And a point I made earlier is teachers now have the evidence, the work or the progress a child has made dating back the last academic year. So there's a lot of trust gone from we want to be immersed in effective ideas, but we also, we're now tracking kids' mental health with loads of coloured cells, red, green, amber. Ultimately, we just want to talk to kids. Everyone needs to be listened to, including ourselves, with our line managers, whoever it would be. And there's loads of great apps also where teachers can now talk on their phone. It can record. I could do a demonstration here, but I wouldn't know if it would pick up on your podcast. Obviously not. But if I can speak to my phone through Alexa or Siri, what I can say that can type as I speak would be 3 times quicker than what you can write. So that's a great workload tip for me as a teacher. But if I could then PDF that or email it to a student, cut it out, stick it in the book, then great. But where it's all been lost is we now have to evidence everything that we say, when ultimately we need to get back to a place where we just trust the teacher to be very explicit, very specific about what they want the student to know or to act upon, but also be very implicit about what the feedback is. And research shows, direct instruction, teacher clarity. For me, I call it stickability. Is what do you want the kids to learn, and focus on that rather than the doing. And that shows great impact on disadvantaged students. So for me, I just want to get back to a place where teachers are allowed to talk to the kids, and they don't necessarily have to rubber stamp every conversation, or Ross has to write down what Mr. McGill said, then Mr. McGill has to respond, and then Ross has to show that he's done it before we can move on to the next piece of work. So in England, we call that triple marking. And, it's all right to get immersed in some deep marking. I'm not going to put a number on it, but if you're doing it every lesson, then you're just doing triple the amount of workload, and it's not sensible. There's a need and a time and a place, but I wouldn't put a number on it. It'd be against my beliefs.
Yeah, definitely. It seems very much like double handling.
Yes.
So we've actually adopted some of your techniques into our practice. For example, Tess and I have both actually used live marking.
Right,
so
fantastic.
which practical idea has made a real difference in your classroom?
So I'm a design technology teacher. I have a visualizer, so the little cameras you have on your desk. So, and I guess that's live marking. I put the kids' drawing or paragraph or whatever it would be, or I would model it myself, and kids would watch me do it on the screen. If it was Wi-Fi enabled, I could go around the classroom and everyone could see their work on the board. Or a child's piece of work could come underneath. So along with live marking, as I'm giving that feedback, a great technique is the yellow box, where, and it doesn't have to be yellow. I'm not going to tell you off to use a pink or a red pen. Essentially, I look at it as a coaching methodology or zonal feedback, where I choose one specific area and I want you to improve that one thing. Because if I mark the entire essay, you're going to get lost. I'm going to get lost in ticking and flicking and doing all sorts of things, when I ultimately just want you to fix one thing. So it's a bit like a find and fix. So the yellow box is a great strategy. I think it works in most subjects if for day-to-day marking, to reduce the workload, to increase impact, and more importantly, to make sure that whatever strategy you are using, whether it's live marking or zonal or yellow box, zonal marking, great classroom ideas work when kids know it's a routine or they know it's coming. I think when you try one-off things, they don't necessarily work. So most teachers generally develop their own repertoire and have their list of strategies. For me, live marking would be the number one, and forget the camera. Me choosing 4 or 5 kids every lesson up to the front, sit with me at the desk, bang, 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 that's it. And so I don't have to take it home. And if that becomes a routine, kids expect it. And if you can, 4 or 5 lessons in a week with the same class, then all of a sudden you've marked every kid's work and you're not taking it home.
That's great. In your book, you write about the traits of an effective teacher. In your experience of lesson observations, what are the main qualities that all good teachers share?
Oh, that's a good one. When I thought about this, when I wrote my second book, The Teacher Toolkit, I started to think, well, what would be the hallmarks of a teacher surviving? You might have to help me here in terms of the stats for Australia, but most teachers about 10% of teachers don't get to the end of their first year in training, and then about 40-50% don't reach their 5th year.
Yeah, we're pretty similar here as well.
Yeah, apparently it's that 4th year.
Yeah, okay. So, I would imagine that's the same in lots of countries. Now, I've met lots of colleagues who've done 40-50 years, so I'll guess I'm kind of maybe on the other, the side where I'm well experienced, having reached 25 years. But I really started to think, what would be the hallmarks of, regardless of what phase of your career, whether you're new to teaching, new to middle leadership, or new to senior leadership. And I thought about it in this sense. The first year you need to be resilient. So you need to experiment, learn from your failures, be reflective. Once you pretty much survive your first year, the second year you start to be a bit more thoughtful. So, not saying that it's an intelligent process, but in my second book, I've got 5 words: resilience, intelligence, innovative, collaborative, and aspirational. And if I just unpick them, the first one, you need to be resilient. Second one, you can think more intelligently about the things you're doing, refine your techniques. As you get more confident, you start to be innovative. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean technology, but you might get immersed with a bit of research. You might trial different strategies within your own classroom or department. And then generally what happens is, after that 3rd or 4th year, once you've got that repertoire, you start to collaborate and share. Or someone notices something great that you're doing and you're asked to explain it a bit more in your department or across the whole school. And I think when people get to that stage, they then start to aspire to sharing it to the next level. Whether that happens in your 4th or 5th year, it's not exclusive, but that's generally what I see the cycle. And then, in your 4th or 5th year, if you do reach a new kind of a level of responsibility in your school, a new promotion, for example, I think the cycle repeats. You've got to be tough in your first year of middle leadership, then you think more intelligently, then you get a bit more innovative, take risks, then you start to share, and then you might go into, and I think it's a nice way of looking at generally the cycle of your teaching career. But obviously within those are all the typical teacher characteristics, great listener, a bit of humor, discipline, firm but fair, all those kind of things. So yeah.
Now obviously tapping back into your experience in being in leadership, what do you think it takes for teaching to develop and to thrive in a school? So good teaching
across the whole school. It's got to start at the very top, and that in a flip model starts from allowing teachers to have a voice. So Mark Plan Teach evolved through 100 teachers having a say in what the policy would look like. And if we said yellow box or green box or pink box, we would thrash it out and we would trial it and then we'd come back to it. So it very much evolved from the top by giving people that collective voice. And then I think the critical thing if I think of some of the head teachers now, they live and die by what they say. They don't tuck away in the corridors. They're out at lesson changeover. They'll, if you're having a bad day, they'll step in. They'll tell you to go home. They'll cover for you. It's doing the two things. It's from grassroots up, but also top down, where top people are modelling, and that's also quite a difficult thing to do because school leaders take on. School leaders, generally, the greatest ones, do their own work after school hours when everyone else has gone home, because the rest of the day is making sure that everyone's surviving and thriving in their day. So, managing kids on corridors, tiers in department offices, collaborating behind the scenes for weeks or months in advance for this one CP or professional development day that's happening, where it might be you or me speaking with our colleagues for the first time. So you're not only managing to make it a powerful event, but you're managing the member of staff's emotions about speaking in front of the peers for the first time. So it's very complicated, but a great teachers kind of bring their staff along the way and show them the ropes. But also, I guess, hide away all the complexities of school life, such as safeguarding, all the nasty things that you might see publicly, or parent arguments, or fight, all these things that go on in school. It's hiding them away from day-to-day life, or also sharing those things with staff on a need-to-know basis, so that they also feel part of the communication thread. There's nothing worse when staff are aware of something but nothing's communicated, it suddenly creates a them and us, and I don't think that's very good for culture.
That's a great answer. Thanks for that. We know your book is heavily backed up with research and psychological perspectives. Do you think it's important for teachers to be familiar with educational research and cognitive psychology?
Yeah, I guess because last 10 years writing blogs has allowed me to accidentally discover it, and I guess it's also challenged me to be immersed with it. But the issue is teachers don't have time. Now there's two things here. One, schools need to facilitate time for staff to be immersed, whether it's action research or every Wednesday you read a book in a book club. But also there's once I qualify as a teacher, that can't be it for the rest of my career. There's an obligation or a professional duty for me to want to be the best that I can be, whether I'm a doctor, a pilot, a teacher, or whatever it would be. Now, you think of the teachers that you work with, there'll be some that are hungry and want to do a lot, and there'll be a mixture of people that live and breathe teaching 24/7 versus people that get a bit sick of Ross always talking about teaching, or turning every conversation back about the classroom, even when you're out with friends at dinner. So there's a level of degree of how much you get immersed with it, but also the best teachers know when to switch off. But I think so there's two things. One, schools facilitating that. Secondly, also teachers as an individual, not just being qualified, but having that bug to want to learn. I guess going back to my point about social media, it's allowed me to have my ideas critiqued immediately with teachers from Australia, rather than me waiting when my colleague in the office next door to me is free after they've taught a lesson. I get immediate feedback along the lines through social media exposure, and as we want to be a bit more aware of evidence and action learning and cognitive psychology. It goes back to that cliche, how do we learn? And to understand the brain, none of us know where we really are with that. We're miles away. Once the scientists get there, then that might filter into psychologists, and then it might filter down into us as teachers to impact that on the classroom, and then it might get to kids and parents after that. But I think we're 100 years away from even getting close to some of that. So we can only try our best, and I think as we connect more with psychologists, counsellors, specialist support that look after our kids in the schools, that's really healthy for us as teachers. But it cannot be left alone to Ross, who's really wanting to learn, versus Ross, who's a bit grumpy and a bit bored with it all. Schools have to facilitate a time for staff to be immersed with that. So there's lots of ways they can do that. I can explore that if you want to in another question.
Oh, you can go and explore that at the moment if you'd like.
Please do.
Ideas that I've done. So the Wednesday afternoon was something that we put in place. So we consulted parents. We sent kids home after lunchtime. We kept some kids behind in facilities to do homework and revision, but largely every Wednesday there was an opportunity for staff professional development. Sometimes that was all the staff together. So in the beginning of the Mark Plan Teach, that was the case, but every other week it was often to departments to trial ideas, to come back with feedback, or to collaborate with different departments. Or also where staff could go out and immerse themselves outside of school with different schools, or on a kind of long-term qualification. So we did things like that. We also had something simple as a CPD menu, which is basically like getting a menu from your local curry shop or your kind of takeaway, where you could just see what's available. So if I'm a new member of staff, or I'm too shy and I don't want to talk to Mr. McGill, the grumpy deputy head, then at least I know what the school will fund me for, and that kind of generates a conversation. So suddenly when that was published, it opened up lots of people coming to me to talk about their professional development, and it was just brilliant to have so many people want to talk about being better. And I think by sharing that online, I think that impacted on lots of other people, just that simple idea. But another great idea was speed dating. So you think, I'm not being on speed dating, but the concept is you face one another at a desk, and every 3 minutes you move around. So using that idea in a kind of professional development sense, bring teachers together to talk about their teaching practice and what ideas work. And it's a bit of fun, and you can get people to vote. But the principle was that you have every teacher facing one another, and you rotate every couple of minutes. You swap an idea. After about 20 or 25 rotations, every staff votes the top three, and the person with the first top one vote or top votes kind of get prizes. Or maybe the first idea is that when we first did it, is we committed to rolling out that idea as a whole school teaching and learning strategy, because it was apparent that a lot of people really liked it. So just a great way of facilitating discussions. The most powerful professional development sessions that I've led or been part of is when staff talk about teaching. And we don't do it enough. And it's developing subject pedagogy, it's developing your knowledge, rather than you come and listen to an event where one person at the front, generally a school leader, says this is what you need to do. It's much better coming from people that are living it day to day, saying, I've tried this idea, this is what works, what do you think? Let's critique it. So they're just two little ideas, but there's many more.
Those are great ideas, though.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually have something quite similar to that at our school that we've started this year called the 15-minute forum, and it's on Wednesday mornings before school. Just teachers, all different teachers, just elect to talk about something that they're interested in.
Yeah, good.
And there's a light breakfast provided, and it's just like a sort of a very casual, low-key, but very useful PD. So yeah, it was really nice hearing all that stuff, reaffirming what we're doing.
It's voluntary, and great. It'd be great to get a full room where you've got too many people and you have to open it up to a bigger room. But not everyone can make first thing in the morning, or so it's kind of facilitating different windows. Some staff might want to do it in the afternoon. You've got part-time teachers, people with young kids that have got to pick them up from school. So yeah, it's creating that culture where it becomes commonplace. Where people can have a voice, and what I'm starting to notice is a lot more teachers are getting more confident about sharing, because blogs, tweeting their own ideas, getting feedback, suddenly 100 people liking your resource gives you the confidence to share it. People are quite scared about talking to one another in front of their peers. You have teach meets over in Australia as well, don't you? So that's a nice forum where people can come together informally just to share ideas. So I see a lot more teacher confidence evolving through the use of social media as well.
Great.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that. Well, Ross, I got to say, Tess and I have definitely been able to take away a lot from this. It's been extremely insightful.
Yeah, and look, thanks again so much for talking to us. Michael and I are all about, saving time, but also doing right by the kids, and you've encompassed that really, really nicely.
Thank you. No, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah, look, just to remind our listeners as well, could you please tell us about your website and where they could find a copy of your book?
So the website is teachertoolkit.co.uk. On all the social media channels, as you would expect, and Mark Plan Teaching, grab on Amazon. I'm sure there's an Australian version. If you can't find it, send me a tweet or send me an email via the Teacher Toolkit website, and I'll point you in the right direction. A lot of the ideas are already in the blog in different forms, dating back to 2007 or 8, I think, when I first started the blog. But I guess in the book, they're all been revamped and updated and brought into a nice tidy little book with lots of links to research and psychology, which makes it I think quite accessible. And the chapter by chapter summary allows people to read a chapter, and I think that gets people's brains buzzing enough, never mind the whole book. So I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you
so much. I look forward
to
coming to Australia one time. Hopefully I can get over soon.
Oh, you are more than welcome to come. Perth's just the other side over from Brisbane, though, so you've got to take...
I've got my best friend's family's in Perth as well, so I've got a lot of people, so it makes sense for me to come over soon. So,
it's only a 6-hour flight from Brisbane. It's not too far.
It's actually winter at the moment. It's about 26 degrees. Over, It's really nice weather at the moment.
I don't mind the weather.
Thanks so much again, Ross. Like we said, it was very insightful and some amazing ideas and tips for us as young educators, and also just anyone within the teaching industry.
Yeah, thank you. Just give us a shout if you need anything. I'll happily help, post a video, or if people want things explained, I'll happily do that.
Oh, thank you. You're a legend. Thanks so much.
much.
Have a great day.
My pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Our day's almost over.
See you, mate. So, Tessa, we've just finished our interview with Ross McGill, and I think both of us can say we gained a lot from it. What are some of the takeaways you've taken from it?
Oh, so much. as a new teacher, a lot of what he was saying was resonating with me. But particularly that cycle he was discussing about, in your first year, you've got to be resilient. And my first year was last year, and I definitely had to be resilient. And then your second year, you've got to start to sort of consolidate, and then you can sort of be more curious and sort of think about what else you can do. And then after that, you can start to take risks. And I can really see that sort of coming through in the way that I'm teaching. And yeah, it was just really nice to reaffirm that, that's the way it should be going. Yeah. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, great point by you, but I was also thinking about the whole idea of us double handling or triple marking, as he called it, because I think we take it for granted a little bit, except it's something we do so often because it's been so instilled in our practice. But if we just mark smarter and not harder, like he was talking about as well, then all of our lives would be a hell of a lot easier. Yeah,
like marking in class. I've done that a few times with live marking, and it just takes the workload right off. And then you can, make your lessons more engaging, look more into your knowledge. You just got time to do more, which is also going to help your well-being as well.
Yeah, exactly. And even the verbal feedback part of it, because I think we've both done verbal feedback before, but him breaking it down, I've never really seen the benefits, be that great before, because I've always, well, not always, except done a little bit too much written feedback. So it's definitely something I'm going to be approaching a little bit more in my practice.
Yeah, and the way he likened it to like talking to his kids and how much they, he tells them to do something, they do it. So why shouldn't it be the same with his students?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great.
Thanks so much for listening to The Staff Room, and thanks to our guest, Ross McGill. If you would like to follow us on Twitter, my handle is @Michael_Royale, and Tessa's is @Tessa_Johnson 2.
Please make sure you subscribe to our podcast on either iTunes or Stitcher, and feel free to leave a review and give us any feedback on the show. This has been the 3rd episode of The Staff Room. Listen out for episode 4, which will be available shortly.
I'm Michael Royale.
And I'm Tessa Johnson.
Thanks for listening.